Hello everybody, it's me again. I know it's been a while. Hope y'all are having a good day, and I just wanted to say hi. I'm glad to be back. Like I said, it's been a while, so decided to make a video today. I'm pretty sure your first impression is like, what's going on? Well, I've actually been wanting to be making this for a while. Uh, this book series right here, is one of my all-time favorites. This is actually the only book series in my life I have read all of them, every single book. And I'm pretty sure some of y'all might have heard of this book series. The first book came out in like 95 or 96, I think. It was the early 90s when the first book came out. And there's been a few movies that actually have come out. And so, here we go. This is my first I guess you could say review of a book series. Also, I just wanted to make this video to recommend it to you and tell you a little bit about it. And if you have read this book series, I'm pretty sure you probably loved it just like I did. Fun fact, I'm a very slow reader. And I'll admit that I'll be the first one to tell you I'm slow when it comes to reading. And of course, when I saw like most of these books were like over 300 pages long, I was like, oh, this is gonna take me forever to read this. I read most of these books in a week. Coming from a person that it took since the 5th grade to read the whole entire Bible, which I'm happy I accomplished that last semester. Of course, I took breaks in between and I wish I would have got done sooner, but it took me forever just to read the book of Genesis, which is like way shorter than this, which is sad to say. It took me forever that long to like read it, but these books right here are amazing. Like this whole series is like goes above and beyond. And so I'm happy to be here to tell you about it. And I hope if you've never read it, I hope from what you watch here today, I hope you wind up reading it. So there are 16 books in total. I know it's kind of hard to see. I was struggling to try and get it to where I could, have it all in frame, and I know it's hard to read some of these titles, so I was just going to take the camera here and pan it a little bit. So you have it divided up into the prequels, which came out in the early 2000s actually, and then you have the original series started with Left Behind, and it goes all the way to the glorious appearing here, this white one here, and then you have the sequel, Kingdom Come. So it's a lot, I had to say. Some of my friends got kind of discouraged when I told them about it, that it was 16 books. They were like, oh. So, let's start off with the prequels here. The prequels we have are The Rising, which is the first prequel, which, as I said, came out in the early 2000s. This, like I said, Left Behind and Glorious Appearing here. This is the one that came out, Left Behind came out in like 95, I think. And Glorious Appearing came out in, I think maybe 2004 or something like that. And then the 3 prequels came out, which The Rising was the first one. And under the title, in between here, it says The Antichrist is Born. So, I should have said earlier, Left Behind is about the tribulation. So, I'll get into it more, but this is like really the tribulation. Probably as you could tell from like the title Armageddon and all that stuff. So, this is like a fictional series about what could happen during the tribulation. So, The Rising is where, it's setting on the stage, as it says, Antichrist is born. So this is talking about the Antichrist's childhood, a few of the other main characters that are in the original series. Talks about their childhood, how their upbringings were. But it mainly focuses on the Antichrist's childhood. And so, I don't want to spoil anything for you, but I might say a few of the characters' names, because one of the characters, his name is the 3rd book. So it'll kind of give you a hint about who the Antichrist might be in this series. And then the second prequel is called The Regime. This is, and under, in between the title says Evil Advances. This is talking about the Antichrist is entering adulthood, talks about what he starts doing with his life, um, becomes a businessman and a politician. So it's really setting up his life and all that stuff that you probably would think the Antichrist does to get his name out there. And of course, it talks about some of the adulthood of the other main characters from the original series. So it's really just setting them up. That's really all the prequels were doing, really like setting the time frame up for this series to take over. And then the final prequel we have is The Rapture. I'm pretty sure you can tell from the title, it gives it away what this book is about. I have to say, this one was my favorite out of the prequels. In between the title, it says In the Twinkling of an Eye. So I have to say, it was very, very interesting. I don't really want to spoil it for you, but it was a cool fact that they went into the mind and went into like the setting for someone that was caught up in the rapture that was called home. I thought that was a pretty interesting take. I thought it was pretty neat. And so, as I said, this is my favorite out of the prequels. I have to say, one criticism I would give the prequels is that they don't bring like the same exact impact as the original 12 did when I read them. And of course, I know these came out afterwards. I think if Dr. Tim LaHaye and author Jerry B. Jenkins would have come out with these first, this would have been a total flop. It would not have taken off the way it did. And also, another criticism I will give the prequels is they're kind of inconsistent with the plots in these books, because I was reading The Regime, and there were two main characters from this series in The Regime. In this series, I believe it was Soul Harvest, the first time the two met in this series, and they were like, oh, we had never met each other. In the prequels, they were on an assignment together and had several meetings together, and they visited and talked to each other. I just find that inconsistency with, Soul Harvest right here, the fourth book, going like, oh, hey, this is the first time I met him. And then you read the prequel, and it's like, no, we knew each other for a very, very long time. Just a little criticism I would give it. And if you see me adjusting here, it took me forever to set this thing up. I thought I was never going to get this set up because they kept falling over on me. I actually have stuff on this side trying to hold up the paperback books. It's just a couple of candles, really. Just a few candles I found that give it like a little bit more weight on this side. And probably just another thing you've noticed is that the covers are different. I borrowed a few of these for my mom's collection over there. I have the entire series myself. Which, real quick, I want to give a shout out to my mom and my dad and my grandmother and my great aunt Judy. They're the ones that suggested this book series to me. My great aunt Judy helped me order the prequels and the sequel here, and she actually ordered my copy of Assassins here, The Indwelling, The Mark, Desecration, Remnant, and Armageddon. Well, she didn't order all of them. Her and my grandmother found a few of them at the library sale they were having, but my Aunt Judy really helped me get these books. And my sister bought two of these for me, Soul Harvest and Apollyon. She actually bought me those, not too long ago, actually, as a gift for saying thanks to Austin for letting me borrow your car for a whole week. I know I'm a good brother that way. Shout out to myself. Hope I made you laugh a little bit right there. So, back to what I was talking about. So now we are to the original 12, ranging from Left Behind to Glorious Appearing. I have to say, the first 5 right here really go over like the first half of the tribulation. From Assassins, it's exactly the midpoint. And then from the Indwelling on is the second half. Left Behind, this book actually takes some aspects from the first few chapters of Left Behind and puts it in there. So this follows exactly, well, it doesn't really technically follow in some ways because it's starting off where this one left off. And this one took stuff from the first chapter of this book and put it in here. So it kind of somewhat's going on at the same time, but then it follows up what happens after those events. So Left Behind is when the rapture happens. Left Behind is when the rapture happens. And I had to say, it comes on full force. It's not like, oh, a few chapters, then it happens. No, it's literally full force. It happens right at the beginning of the book. Which I found it interesting because the first time I read this, I was like, probably just a few chapters, and then it'll be, oh, look, hey, this is what happened. No, it was full force. It did not take its time to get its point across. 1 second here. Oh, hey, Figaro. Sorry, guys, my cat started pawing at my leg a little bit. Hey, Figgy Piggy. And, so then Tribulation Force here. Tribulation is the next book. Tribulation Force is the next book. This goes over the treaty with Israel, the 7 years peace treaty, which is the start of the tribulation. This is what this book mainly talks about, and it talks about the witnesses that show up during the tribulation. It was very interesting, actually, because there's that ongoing debate about who the witnesses might be. Some people think it's going to be Moses and Elijah, and some of them are going to think it's going to be Enoch and Elijah. If you haven't heard of that debate, it's actually a very interesting debate, or at least I find it interesting because both sides of the argument are pretty true. So I would suggest looking into that sometime. And then we have book 3, which is called Nikolai. As I did say, one of the main characters, his name is the book title, and this one is called The Rise of the Antichrist. But that's another thing, that every book has like a little subtitle. Like for Tribulation Force, it's continuing the drama for those left behind, and then Left Behind is a novel of Earth's last days. So this book is talking about when a year and a half of peace is over, and the red horse is unleashed, war breaks out, and the Antichrist starts taking more control. And I have to say, reading it was pretty scary, actually, in some ways, because almost sounded like what politicians are doing today. Sad to say. Soul Harvest here. Soul Harvest kind of takes a little bit to get going, I have to say, because every book starts where the last one left off. So the tail end of this, there's a worldwide earthquake, called the Wrath of the Lamb in Revelations. So this one starts exactly right after that happens. It's the aftermath. And so it's called Soul Harvest, and it's called The World Takes Sides. So this is like when the world's quite literally being cut in half, because people were like, should I trust this guy that's taking over the world, or should I trust this religious group, or should I just stay neutral? And I'm kind of sad, because right here on the cover, it looks like where someone took pencil and started writing on it. And so there's little marks on it, and that's a pet peeve of mine. And of course, my sister was like, oh, I'm sorry about that. I didn't realize it, which I don't blame her. But to me, respect books, people. Respect them. Especially the ones I like. Respect them. Hope I made you laugh again there. So, Soul Harvest was interesting because the witnesses start taking more of a standoff with the Antichrist, and there's really powerful passages in this book because there's a good pastor, which I love the character. I really do. Like, his name's Zion Ben Judah, and I really love his character. I think he's a phenomenal character. And he really helped, like, Tim LaHaye and Jerry B. Jenkins really help you understand the passages in Revelations just more. Now, some of it I still don't understand, and we're really, as they said, we're not meant to understand it. Now we're getting on to, like, personally, one of my top 3 books in this entire series, Apollyon. Oh my gosh, this was so cool. Apollyon, the Destroyer, is unleashed. If you have read the part of Revelations that talks about the Destroyer, aka Apollyon, you would know it unleashes a bunch of demon locusts that sting and have like horses' legs and all that stuff. Pretty disgusting if you ask me. And this book was so cool in my opinion. I loved it so much because, well, one, the Antichrist decides to take on the witnesses one-on-one in a verbal argument, and they flat out bashed him so good. They burned him so bad. It was just amazing. And like, it was just amazing. Just like how action-packed it was, and how also it kept going to the point, getting to the point of like, you don't need to live through this time. Make sure you are right with God before this happens. Like, I completely forgot about this. It seriously says, Fatal Mystery talks and turns water to blood. Like, in the books, parts of the world, water started turning to blood like that. So, it's pretty interesting stuff. Now, I watched other people review this book series, and we're about to get on to the book called Assassins. I was kind of shocked to hear that this was one of the most least liked books in the entire series. I personally thought it was pretty amazing. It's called Assignment. The subtitle here is Assignment, Jerusalem, Target, Antichrist. So, once again, if you know, halfway through the tribulation, the Antichrist will die. And then he will rise from the grave. Basically, mocking Jesus. So, throughout this entire book, some interesting things happen, like demon horsemen start going out and killing the population. The way they described the horses puts a perfect picture in your head, something I don't want to see in real life. And of course, as I tell people as I read this book series, I don't plan on being here when any of this stuff actually happens. So, this book, Antichrist gets killed. And sadly, the witnesses die because, as it says in the Bible, the witnesses will die and then the Antichrist will die. I was personally sad when the witnesses died. So then we go on to the second half of the tribulation, from the indwelling and the glorious appearing. So, the indwelling, it's called The Beast Takes Possession. This is about when the Antichrist completely comes back, and he is completely, fully possessed by Satan. So, it talks about, like, you know, his funeral. Like, they talked about his funeral in this book, and then, of course, it's like the false prophets shown up, and he's like, hey, you need to believe in this man. He's like, I got power from him. And then, as you can tell, this is when everything starts going downhill, like, drastically. Which person from Left Behind and all that said the world's already going downhill, but this is like when it hits its pivotal point of going downhill. And this is also where you found out who killed the Antichrist. I was very shocked to find out who actually killed him. I thought it was some other guy, and turned out I was wrong. And I hate being wrong. And then we go on to the mark. Pretty sure the title's self-explanatory. Like, once again, with like the same with the rapture, the title's pretty self-explanatory. The beast rules the world. So this is when the mark of the beast is introduced. And this is where people are like, this is when the Antichrist really starts cutting down on who's my enemies and who's with me. These books, I have to say, leave you on edge, because, no lie, I would finish reading for the day, and I would actually put the book down going, what's going to happen next? No lie, I would literally sit there going like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? So then, here we go on to Desecration. Desecration, this is when the Antichrist takes the throne. This is the part of the Bible where he's going to desecrate the temple and claim he is God. So this is mainly the focal point of this book. He mocks Jesus throughout the entire book in this one. And let's just say it, just reading it ticked me off. I was like, how dare Satan do that? I was like, that coward, like, man, I can't wait to see his butt get whooped. And then we move on to the remnant, on the brink of Armageddon. This is the book where the remnant of Israel goes into the safe place that God has chosen. So this is mainly about where, the world's getting set up for Armageddon, and this is mainly about where Israel's going to hide out for the rest of the tribulation until the glorious appearing. Well, not technically hide out, but it's their safe place. And a lot of Christians went there too. A lot of the Christians joined Israel, and of course, as God promised, He protect every single one of them. So, we move on to Armageddon. The cosmic battle of the ages. So Israel gets attacked, and the Antichrist has a huge army that's attacking Israel, but Israel's not giving up. And then, of course, it sets up the events for Jesus coming back. I have to say, one of my favorite characters died in this book, and it actually made me emotional because of how the way they died in their last words made me actually emotional. I have to say this is probably in my top 3 as well. Well, actually, let me say top 4, because there's 3 other books I had to say are my top favorites. And then we move on to another one that's actually in my top 4. So I'll just go ahead and say it. My top 4 from the original series is Left Behind, Apollyon, Armageddon, and Glorious Appearing. Once again, the title will probably just give itself away, and this is where, the end of days. This is where Jesus comes back, and he takes over the world. Well, not takes over the world. He rightfully claims his throne as king of this world, and he banishes the Antichrist, locks Satan up for 1,000 years. And it's just really interesting to read because, you really get to learn how much, in this book, you really just learn how much of a puppet the Antichrist is for Satan. Like, even in the book, Satan popped up out of the Antichrist's body and was like, do you think I really need you? No, I have a plan myself. I don't really need you anyway. And then the Antichrist actually apologized. It was like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry, Master. Please forgive me. I found it so interesting. I was like, man, the Antichrist technically is just really a puppet. And so we move on to the final book in this series, which I personally have to say was one of my least favorites, is Kingdom Come, which is the final victory. This is the sequel. This is the last book. This was the 16th book. Well, wait a second. Let me pause for a second. Time out. If you actually asked me to grade this one from a A to F scale, Left Behind would be A. I would say this is an A. This one's a D for me. Nikolai was kind of boring in my opinion. It had its moments, but I found it kind of boring. And so I'll probably give it 2 stars or something, if I was doing on 1 to 5 star scale. Soul Harvest, I would give it a solid A. This one would be 100 A, Apollyon. Assassins, I would give it a solid A. Solid A, solid A, solid A, solid A. A plus, all the way. And this one, A plus all the way. And then this one, I have mixed feelings about. Personally, this book made 0 sense, 0. Like, it's about the millennial kingdom, and as we all know, the Bible does not talk about the millennial kingdom, not that much, because you have that one chapter in Revelation. You have that one chapter that briefly mentions it, saying like, there's going to be 1,000-year reign. There's going to be children during the 1,000-year reigns that refuse Christ. Satan's going to be let loose afterwards, and then he's going to build up another vast army. They're going to lose again, and then he's going to be thrown into hell for the rest of time, and there will be no end to the peace and happiness. This book really just made no sense. It really did. Like, I wish I could say that this was just a phenomenal book like the rest of this series was. Really, if you ask me, this book series could have done without it. Really, I think they could have just left it alone after Glorious Appearing. Well, in some ways, I think the prequels weren't needed. But, like, one thing that was confusing for me, like, let me go over it here. They really, like, made God and Jesus very absent from this story. And stuff that happened in the book, I was like, I don't really know if that's gonna happen in the 1,000-year reign. Like, they had to go back to doing sacrifices, and Jesus even said, this is really pointless, but we're gonna make you do it anyway. It was like, these sacrifices won't save you. I can only save you, but you have to do them anyway. And I was like, I question that, really. And it was talking about how heaven, the 1,000-year reign's not the best utopia. Like, it literally says all is not well in utopia and all that stuff, which, of course, it seriously said people are going to refuse Christ like they do now. So, I get what it's saying, but they almost made it where the 1,000-year reign is not going to be that nice. Like, it really came off that way, like, the 1,000-year reign's just not going to be the best thing you and I have to go through. Just one second here. I'm going to a point that really confused me about this book. Of course, this is called the 1,000-year reign. So, chapter 5 says 93 years into the millennial. Well, into the millennium, excuse me. So it's 93 years into sorry, I'm getting lost for a second. So it's 93 years into the 1,000-year reign. That's how much that's how many pages right here, the 93-year plot takes place. There's only one chapter about how the millennial kingdom ends. And there's only 2 chapters, well, there's 4 chapters about how it starts. So they summed up 900 years in like a handful of pages. Literally, no lie, I was sitting there reading and I was like, well, what's this chapter about? And it literally was like, in the last 900 years, this, and this, and this. I'm like, that's it? That's really all that happens? That's how this book ends? I was confused by it. But I would still suggest reading it because I'm not one for, like, reading a whole entire book series and then refusing to not read one of the books. And as I did mention before, there are movies. I have the 3 with Kirk Cameron. One's called Left Behind the Movie, Tribulation Force, and World at War. The third one, I'm not the biggest fan of. It really got away from these books. I didn't like that. And there's one with Nicolas Cage in it. I would highly suggest don't watch it. It was awful. It was really, really bad. And they're actually coming out with another one that's based off of the 3rd book here. I would really like to see that, if you ask me. And overall, once again, I would highly suggest these books, and I would suggest these movies. The movies did pretty good, in my opinion. I like Kirk Cameron. I think he's a good actor, so I thought he did pretty good at his character. Um, and they're not like the longest movies, but they're pretty good. They're just all a little bit over an hour long. And I would highly suggest the movies as well. And if you ever do decide to read these books, I hope you enjoy them as much as I did. Like I gave the shout out to my family who really helped me get into these books. I 100% can't thank them enough. And I just hope that you try them out. And I would love to hear feedback if you do get to read them. Message me on Facebook or something. Or if you're one of my friends watching this, I can even tell you like where some of them are at. You could buy some. I've seen a few at Barnes and Nobles. You could order them off of Amazon. Just be careful. Just make sure you click on the right one, because I was looking on Amazon for these books one time, and I was like, "Whoa, no way! I get the whole series for less than like $100." I didn't realize that said Kindle on it. Then I was like, "Oh, that's the Kindle version." Now, if you want to look and try and find like this whole series, there's there's the new covers, what they're most likely selling nowadays. The prequels, most of these, if you buy them in threes, they're like 50 something dollars, and then you actually have a couple. They actually have books that are three of them in one. I don't think they have one for the prequels. I think Kingdom Comes just by itself, but there's a book where you get Left Behind through Nikolai together, Soul Harvest through Apollyon together, Indwelling through Desecration together, and The Remnant through Glorious Appearing together. So I would highly suggest it. They also have a kids book series. I haven't read those, but I've heard they're good. I've heard that they're very thin books. They sell them in volumes. I think they don't really sell them by themselves. They really sell them in volumes. Like I think one's called The Vanishings. That's about the rapture. There's one called like Nikolai High. So maybe in the future, if I buy those, I can tell you how they are. And so I'm gonna wrap this video up, and I hope you got something out of this. Once again, I hope you try these books out. Highly suggest it, and I hope y'all have a good one.